Yeah, thanks very much, Tim, and thanks to Share Cafe for the opportunity to present today. This is a bit of an undiscovered story. We've been flying below the radar for a long time. Our shareholders know us well, but not many people outside of our pretty tight register. So it's nice to be able to share the story with your investor group. Jindalee Resources, our lead project is the McDermott lithium deposit. It sits in the southeastern corner of Oregon on the Nevada border. The lithium is hosted by the sediments that you can see in that previous slide, and you can see behind me, low range. So the sediments outcrop. It is the largest lithium deposit in the United States, and I understand it's the third largest globally after a couple of brine projects in Chile. It's already got a significant indicated and inferred resource at 21.5 million tonnes of lithium carbonate equivalent. Metallurgy is good because of its geometry. It's flat lying and it outcrops, as I said. It's amenable to a very low cost bulk mining operation, and also because of its scale, it has the potential to supply lithium to the United States for decades and decades. So it's a very strategically important deposit. Jindalee has been listed since 2002, middle of 2002, and we've got a track record of creating wealth for our shareholders. We're skin in the game, so we think like shareholders, not employees, and to the point where we believe that McDermott is such a fantastic opportunity and a transforming project for the company that we spun out all of our Australian assets mid-January as Dynamic Metals. DYM's the code, and Jindalee is now a pure play US lithium company. Next slide. So just a corporate snapshot. Because we've been very successful as a project generator. Our first share issue after listing in 2002 was 17 years after our IPO. So that was obviously 2019. That was very small raising, and that was to basically after we proved up McDermott. I should say we discovered McDermott. We own it 100%. And so pretty well all of our energy since discovery in 2018 has been towards de-risking this project and taking it up the value curve. Very tight capital structure, under 60 million shares on issue, very tightly held. The top 20 hold around 80% of the issued capital. I'm the largest shareholder. I founded the company. I've never sold a share. I'm a huge believer in Jindalee and in particularly the McDermott project. It's going to be a transforming project for our shareholders. Market cap around 115 at the close of business yesterday. Cash and investments, what's that, around about 7.5 million. So look, we look very cheap on any comparison given the scale of our asset. Next slide. A very experienced board, chaired by Justin Manalini, who's a lawyer with merchant banking experience. I'm a geologist, as I said. I founded the company. Project generation has been my forte. We recently added two non-executive directors with strong lithium experience, Darren Waits, who cut his teeth with Neo Metals, and Paul Brown, who until recently headed up Mineral Resources lithium division. We've got a really good guy on the ground, US manager Brett Marsh. Next slide. Cameron's already given us a really good overview of supply and demand, but there's one slide in here I think is really important. So next slide. And that is the number of battery factories currently operating or under construction or that have been announced to be built in the United States. It's real. They are right across the United States, mainly JVs between Korean battery makers and US automakers. A few Japanese battery makers also involved. And I'll draw your attention to the slide, the sort of inset, if you like, in the bottom left-hand corner, which is a benchmark a mineral intelligence forecast of the demand for lithium carbonate to supply these battery factories. And benchmark estimate that by 2031, the US is going to need, around 600,000 tonnes of lithium carbonate for these battery factories. The US currently produces around about 5,000 tonnes of lithium carbonate, and that's expected to rise to about 10,000 towards the end of the year, give or take. But obviously the elephant in the room is, where is the lithium going to come from? And that's where, we believe that these giant deposits like McDermott and our neighbour Thacker Pass, very large, low-grade mega deposits, will be needed. They have to be developed to meet this demand. Next slide. And the US government is clearly recognised that they are facing a critical shortage of lithium, and we're seeing some very positive announcements from both sides of Parliament. So bipartisan support for US critical minerals projects, including lithium. And the last bullet point down there is, that's only a couple of weeks ago that the Department of the Interior released a press release that basically noted that they're working on updating, this is a bipartisan committee, is working on updating the mining laws, the regulations and the permitting processes of critical minerals projects in the United States. And that's because they have to shorten the permitting process to help projects get up to meet this demand, which is huge. Next slide. And also, Cameron mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act, and that obviously is very, very important to us. That third bullet point there's a lot of money that's available from the Department of Energy to fund the capex of these projects. They're very high capex projects, because not only are they large, but you're building a chemical plant on the back of the mine. So, but as I said, they're critical to the electrification in the United States. So the money is starting to flow. We saw mid-January, the Department of Energy announced a $700 million US conditional loan to the Rhyolite Ridge project, which has got 3.4 million tonnes of lithium carbonate equivalent. I remind viewers that our project currently is 21.5 million tonnes of lithium carbonate equivalent and still open to the West. And then, in February, Lithium Americas, who are our neighbours, announced, that they're also expecting to receive up to 75% of the capex of their project, Thacker Pass, from a Department of Energy loan. So it's real. The money is there, and it's starting to flow. Next slide. So a bit on McDermott itself. Next slide, sorry. So it sits at the northern end of the McDermott caldera. That's a volcanic crater. You can see the outline of the caldera there in yellow. So we're at the northern end. At the southern end of the McDermott caldera is the Thacker Pass deposit. You're looking here at the two largest lithium deposits in the United States. So we're there at 21.5 million tonnes of lithium carbonate equivalent, and Lithium Americas Thacker Pass deposit at 19 million tonnes of lithium carbonate equivalent, and development of Thacker Pass has commenced after a drawn-out permitting process. As I said, we own the project 100%. We discovered it back in 2018, and each year we've drilled more holes to de-risk it and take it up the value curve, and we've got a long way to go yet, we believe. A lot more value to create for shareholders. Next slide. So middle of last year, the resource was 13.3 million tonnes of lithium carbonate. We drilled 21 holes late last year, mostly to infill the inferred resource, which is shown there in red, and also a few twinning of RC holes, which was undertaken mostly in the indicated resource, which is in yellow. Very, very successful program. Next slide. You can see down the bottom of the slide there, big widths of continuous mineralisation from shallow depths on the western side of the deposit and from surface on the eastern side of the deposit. There's a bit of just a kind of cartoon schematic showing the sediments in grey resting on top of the green basement. And the main thing to note there is just the continuity, the continuous homogeneity, really, of the mineralisation. It is so predictable from hole to hole. Next slide. So with those those intercepts, it was clear we were going to get a significant uplift in the resource, which we did. So late February, we announced that the resource had increased by just over 60% to 21.5 million tonnes lithium carbonate equivalent, making it as I said, the largest lithium deposit in the United States. And importantly, Now just over 50% of that resource is in the indicated category, which you can see there in yellow on the slide there, surrounded by the red. And also important to note that there's been no drilling done in the west and southwest of the deposit, of our project, other than one hole out on the very edge of the tenement boundary. Okay, next slide. So there's no point in having the largest lithium deposit in the United States if you can't get the lithium out. And we've trialled two routes, acid leaching and alkali salt or sulfation roasting. Both have worked very well for us. Late February, we announced the results of a review by Fluor into all of our met test work, and they've recommended, beneficiating the ore, which works really well, and acid leach as the best way to progress this project that delivers the optimum financial result for the project. So we're in the process of selecting representative samples for that at the moment. Next slide. We also, in mid-February, announced that we've signed an MOU, non-binding, with POSCO. POSCO is spending $2 million on test work on a large sample of ore. They took a small sample from us middle of last year and came back for a much larger one. And we should have the results of that, the first results, by July. Okay. I should also point out that POSCO, the leading supplier of cathode active materials to General Motors. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Just one on ESG, very important. We through last year, we undertook extensive environmental and cultural baseline studies with no showstoppers identified from that work. So we're very confident this project is going to be developed. There's no obvious reason why it shouldn't be. Next slide. One last slide. If there's going to be one slide you remember, it's the size of Jindalee's McDermott deposit compared to other sediment-hosted lithium deposits. As I said, this is an emerging style of deposit, and is going to be around for a long time, and will go a long way to supplying the lithium needs of the US. And look at the relative market capitalizations of Jindalee, if you like, relatives to some of the owners of these projects. There's a hell of a lot of upside in Jindalee, that's for sure. Next slide. Yeah, what's coming up? So we've announced the updated resource. They've Fluor are working with us to optimise the flow sheet. We've lodged a plan for a much larger drilling program with the BLM, being complete in May. We're undertaking detailed studies, mining and processing, which will probably feed into a PFS to be announced. Hopefully we'll be undertaking further drilling in the September quarter, building the team, and we're still, other than POSCO, we're also engaging with other end users, particularly those in the US. I think that's it.
Thank you, Lindsay. A quick question. You touched on permitting, which has obviously causes some delays in the US. It does take some time. Can you give us kind of an update on how that process might change in terms of how long the time frame is?
Well, at the moment, under the current permitting regime in the United States, we expect to permit a project of this scale, and also, given that's in southeastern Oregon, we can't move the deposit across into Nevada. So Oregon at the moment doesn't have familiarity with permitting large mining projects, but they're very keen. Talking to the elected officials and head of the mines department there and so on, very keen to change that. They've kind of got really lucky to have, geology has no respect for state borders, and they've wound up with the largest lithium deposit in the nation, in the southeast corner of Oregon, in the poorest county in Oregon, and it's a long, long way from Salem and the major population centres, Portland, whatever, on the west coast. So, and it has the potential to deliver obviously a lot of jobs and revenue to the state of Oregon. So, it's pretty attractive project. But there is a process you have to go through. And at the moment, that process, as I hinted with the bipartisan committee looking at ways to fast track the permitting process. We're currently expecting a 5-year process before we've got, basically permission to commence development, and that'll take another 2 years probably because, these are very, very large projects. So we wouldn't be in production for 7 years realistically. So we'd like that permitting process to to be compressed, and we think it's important, and especially looking at Cameron's slides on the demand for lithium, from basically 2030 onwards, we think it's important that it's compressed because, it takes 2 years to build a gigafactory, but, at least 5 years and plus another 2 years for construction to permit a mining project in the Western US. So that's something that, it needs to be sorted out. We're going through the process. As I said, we've started the baseline studies. We've got, no red flags were raised from that work. We've started engagement with the local Indian tribes in the district, and we're doing this sort of work very early, I suppose, for a project, which may not be in production for up to 7 years. So, but that's a very important part of your, social license to operate in the United States. And we're very determined that, we bring the local community and stakeholders along with us, and get their wholehearted support.
Lindsay, we're out of time. We're going to ask you one quick question, if you don't mind a quick answer too. Are you in queue for government funding?
We have, yes, we are looking at that. For the loans, the sort of loans that, Royal Light Ridge have got a conditional loan for theirs from the Department of Energy, you really need a completed bankable feasibility study so the DOE can undertake full due diligence on you as a bank would. But there's a lot of money available there in the form of grants, non-dilutional, to try to encourage projects like ours to accelerate through the development stages. So yes, we're definitely targeting those.
Thanks, Lindsay. That's all we have time for. Have a nice weekend, and we'll follow up later in the year.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Thank you.